I'm the proud owner of a Joint Maker Pro, and I've been using it quite extensively for cross-cutting and working with joinery. But I also wanted to try out the capabilities of the rip blade. Up until recently, I hadn't even experimented with the rip blade. So I wanted to cut some thick veneers to use in some inlay work, and I wanted pattern matching of some exquisite woods. So I built a jig and a fixture for it, and I'd like to explain it. One of the problems of cutting thicker veneers on the ripping situation here is how do you hold a piece of wood in place and be able to consistently increment it over to a stop and get accurate, consistent sizes. So I built this small L-shaped jig here to hold it. It's fairly simple, but it works out quite well. The concept is when you have a special piece of wood that you want to cut some thicker veneers out of, you can only go down the depth of the cut, which is a maximum of about 1.25 inches. The thinness or the size or the thickness of each piece is designated by where you put your stop. I was very happy with what I was able to produce. I consistently cut very, very accurate pieces, and the pattern matching was amazing. I tried it in a number of different woods, including this piece of plane tree, or otherwise called sycamore. It's a softer wood, but it worked very, very well with hardly any marks from the saw blade at all. Now the way this works is when you cut your L bracket or your L fence here, you have to clamp your workpiece onto one face of it and be able to increment it forward. So I use Jorgensen clamps here to increment it over, and I have an existing stop down there, so I keep cutting accurate pieces. You know, sometimes you get some incredible wood, but you don't have very much of it. How to hold this accurately for cutting on a table saw would be ridiculous, and cutting with a bandsaw would cut it would be very hard to do, and it would also cut a much wider kerf with the bandsaw blade. Now the key is, after you've cut your first cut all the way down, you pull your piece of wood out and you take it over to the bandsaw, and you make a slice the same direction that you're cutting all the way down, which would correlate with the end of the cuts, so that when you put it back in there, you increment it over, and each slice of veneer, once it reaches the bandsaw cut, will fall off evenly. Accuracy is very, very critical. This fence has got to be dead on square to the back fence. It's got to be square to the table as well. Everything on this machine has got to be square. If anything is even slightly off and you try to cut through that saw blade, that stationary saw blade, you'll either screw up your cut, or more than likely you'll damage your saw blade. Now I wanted to book match a lot of these little pieces so that I could utilize them in the inlay work, and it's difficult to get an absolutely dead square surface, so I just put a hand plane, a very accurate hand plane, in my vise, and I accurately set up a wooden fence to the bed of the hand plane and worked it until it was dead on 90, and used it like a standard jointer, and that worked out very, very good. You can see I used a little push stick with a notch on it as well. There's just a little closer view of my hand jointer setup. It is a jointer plane, but that's how it works. And here's a couple of pieces straight off of the Joint Maker Pro. There's no sanding whatsoever. It's a little difficult to tell, but the matching of the grain is about as close as you could possibly do. The only other exception to better grain matching is if you have a knife-sliced commercial veneer, and in that case there's virtually no wood removed in between. But because this blade is so thin, you get a very, very accurate matchup. Okay, I figured this out. Now I've got some projects to work on. So, boy, I'm kind of envisioning using this as a cutout for a nice leaf, and if I can use some of these grain patterns to match, sort of emulate the veins in the leaf. I'll cut a leaf out of it and use that as an inlay. Well, thanks for taking the time to view this brief presentation. Have fun with your new tool.